Okay, why don't we get started, and then hopefully we'll have a couple more attendees join, but really looking forward to a rich discussion. First of all, just wanted to welcome you guys and thank you so much for joining on your Saturday to discuss this very important topic, and we're looking forward to a great discussion. My name is Allison Marks, and I will be your moderator today. I'm the head of communications and partnerships at SDSN Trends, a global research network working to improve evidence-based decision-making within government to address sustainable development challenges through the use of data, particularly new and innovative data sources. This webinar is jointly hosted by SDSN Trends, the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ, and the UN Development Program in partnership with the UN Economic Commission for Africa as part of its 9th session of the Africa Regional Forum for Sustainable Development. As I mentioned, we have a very exciting topic to discuss: mobilizing data-driven partnerships, the potential for evidence-informed policymaking across Africa. Today, we'll hear from an esteemed group of panelists from the UN Development Program, the Ocean Conservancy, the Rwanda Civil Society Platform, GIZ, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, who will each share their experiences in working in multi-stakeholder data partnerships across countries in Africa and discuss best practices and pathways forward for accelerating data-driven policymaking across the continent. First, I'd like to briefly set the stage for this issue. Quality and timely data and statistics are fundamental to improving evidence-based decision-making. And furthermore, effective use of data can help governments create legitimacy, build trust, and improve efficiency, effectiveness, and transparency, and overall enabling better policies for citizens. And while statistical capacity and the use of data for decision-making has improved across the globe, Africa, unfortunately, still lags quite far behind other regions. In recent years, this has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and other complex crises. This is especially true for civil registration and vital statistics, where only 8 out of 50 African countries have a system to register deaths, as well as for climate data and environmental monitoring, as well as health data. In addition, even in African countries that have the data available, data literacy and weak data-driven policy design cultures remain a challenge. Fortunately, in recent years, there have been some bright spots, many of which we will highlight today, including the rise of novel innovations, including big data and citizen science, and the growth of a number of regional and multi-stakeholder data partnerships to address sustainable development challenges. These innovative multi-stakeholder data partnerships, many of which that have used new data sources and approaches, have proven particularly successful in advancing evidence-informed policymaking for sustainable development within local African communities and have led to more responsive government institutions and citizen awareness. I fully believe that Africa holds the greatest potential for data innovation, but to fully harness its potential in the years to come and ultimately work towards achieving Agendas 2030 and 2063, we must break down the silos and better understand the challenges, practices, and learnings from stakeholders in developing these multi-stakeholder data partnerships to accelerate data-driven decision-making across the continent. I look forward to delving further into these issues during our discussion, as we have an outstanding list of speakers who each bring significant experiences and expertise to this topic and will share their insights. Before we dive into the session, just have a few brief housekeeping notes. First, just wanted to kind of give you the run of show for today. So the session will flow as follows. We will hear brief presentations from 5 speakers, and I will introduce each of them before their respective presentations. Then we will have a lightning round panel discussion on the successes and challenges in developing multi-stakeholder data partnerships with a focus on engaging vulnerable groups and communities. And then we'll have a Q&A session afterwards. For those of you who, and we really hope that you'll communicate and engage with us during the webinar. We really want to make it as interactive as possible. So we invite you to answer any questions in the Q&A box in your screen, and we'll certainly try and answer as many of them as possible. Thirdly, this session will be recorded. So to kick things off, it would be great if everyone could, in the chat box, if they could drop in where they're joining from, as well as their organization, just so we can get a sense of who's in the room. So the chat box is at the bottom of your screen. I see someone from Canada, which is great. Feel free to continue to drop in as we move along to the next. We've got Nigeria, UNDP. Fantastic. Thank you guys for dropping in. We've got someone from a university in Germany. Fantastic. Hello, Igmar. We've got someone joining from Nairobi. Fantastic. Welcome. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to dive into some speaker presentations. First, I'm pleased to introduce Geeti Patwal, who will present on GIZ's Data for Policy approach. Geeti is a junior advisor working with GIZ's Data for Policy team. She's a development professional with a demonstrated experience in program management, policy analysis, and project implementation across areas of financial inclusion, gender, and education. Prior to working at GIZ, Geeti worked at India's Center for Advocacy and Research, the UN Capital Development Fund, and the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. All right, Steph, if we could pull up Geeti's slides, and then Geeti, over to you.
Thank you, Alison, and also a very warm welcome to everyone joining us from different parts of the world. I am Geeti, and as Alison very briefly already mentioned, I work for the Data for Policy Initiative, which is a global political initiative of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, and is implemented mainly by the GIZ. We started out with this project about a little over 1 year ago, and with the main objective of strengthening the integration of data into political decision making. I will take this opportunity to very briefly introduce the initiative and our approach. The project was ideated with the thought that our commitment to eliminate structural inequalities and the achievement of SDGs is accelerated when our initiatives, our solutions are underpinned by high quality data and evidence. So while we were in the needs assessment phase of the project, we were coming across a number of technical innovations, and there are many out there. So best practices, novel tools in the development data context. However, much of this was focused on the data production side of things and not so much on the use and uptake of that data into policies. And that we believe to have a rather longer lasting impact. So we took cognizance of this, and that as a community, we need to tap on the potential of the use of data at a policy making level, which is at a high enough level that can take a policymaker perspective. Next slide, Steph, please. So the previous one. So this is exactly what Data for Policy does. Our very first action towards designing and more importantly, co-designing solutions was to really listen to our target audience. So we interviewed around 20 policymakers and tried to understand their challenges and needs in working with data in both short and long term. So this enabled us to take a three-way approach towards strengthening the use of data in policies, but also the day-to-day decision-making, all while keeping policymakers right at the center of it all. So our very first approach that we use is around the regulatory approach, which concerns the use of, or the ethical use of data. So ranging from data protection, privacy frameworks, and governance mechanisms that ensure there are clear processes, roles, and rules within the governments. So to organize and regulate data exchanges between government entities, but also with external partners such as the private sector, we need some common data sharing frameworks, and we need good practices in establishing these frameworks. So something we are currently supporting our policymakers with. The second for us is like institutional approach. Now, in our work with policymakers, we have often run into this issue of governments not being equipped for integrating data into their decision-making processes. because of there's siloed data collection and analysis. There's the data products that do not really meet the needs of policy units, or simply that the data is not like disseminated properly. In fact, when we speak to the national statistics offices, this is rather common observation that NSOs in fact have a lot of data that can be used for decisions. The issue being that it is either not disseminated at all, or it is not disseminated in a systematic way that can actually help policymakers. So we support our partner governments in building such institutional mechanisms that can break these data silos. And third is our technological approach, which is more technical in nature, as the name suggests. It's focused on building data products that serve the needs of policymakers. So our focus here has not only been on using new data sources or non-traditional data sources such as satellite data, telecommunication data, but also applying new methods of analysis on the available data sets within the governments. Next slide. These three approaches kind of manifest themselves in a number of use cases, as well as capacity building platforms that Data for Policy is implementing together with our partners. So first is our use cases. 7 of them, including 4 in the African region, are representative of really our user-centric approach, wherein each use case has been tailored developed with our government counterparts to cater to a very specific problem statement. So for example, whether it's women's labor force participation and care infrastructure in Mexico City, or economic development of arid and semi-arid land using spatial data in Kenya, each of the use cases are speaking to really diverse needs of policymakers, but also like really different levels of sophistication in data infrastructure in our partner countries. We are also frequently organizing and engaging in practitioner exchanges that bring together a number of stakeholders. So this includes our government counterparts, but also experts in the field of data, with the idea that these exchanges not only facilitate collaboration, but also provide us a platform to share our learnings in terms of both successes and limitations in implementing solutions. And needless to say that these exchanges are also a great example of how multi-stakeholder partnerships can and have really fostered the data for development community. One of the core products that we are currently developing together with UNDP is what we call a data for policy making playbook. Without diving too deep into that right now, I would like to highlight that the needs and challenges of governments that we were able to map as a result of our interactions with policymakers, we will attempt to address those in this playbook, which will support policy makers in their overall journey of using data in decision-making processes. We have Gayan here today from UNDP, who can speak more to what has gone into the development of the playbook. And last but not the least, we have a panel of experts which is guiding us, advising us through the development of the playbook, and making sure that we build a value-driven product. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our partners, SDSN and UNDP, for being strong advocates of this global collaboration, and highlight that many experts from Open Data Institute, Meta to Paris 21 have come together and are really exemplifying our topic of discussion today on establishing multi-stakeholder data partnerships for accelerating evidence-informed policy making across the globe, but also specifically the African region. These initiatives like the playbook, but use cases are building blocks for an increasingly inclusive data ecosystem that we all envision. And this presents a great opportunity for both the German government and our international data community to learn, synthesize, and scale data cooperation in a strategic manner such that it creates value for people on the ground. Over to you, Alison, and I really look forward to the discussions ahead today.
Thanks so much, Geeti. That was fantastic and really, really encouraging to see GIZ's, encouragement and push for sort of mainstreaming data into the policymaking process. I just have a couple follow-up questions that perhaps you can reflect on before we dive into our next speaker presentation. I'm wondering, given that we are at the UN Africa Regional Forum, and this is a side event here, and I'm wondering if you could sort of reflect on how you see GIZ's data for policy approach ultimately working towards the achievement of Agendas 2030 and 2063.
Yeah, that's great question. So as we pretty much, you started with this, that data and evidence has been kind of cornerstone for inclusive development cooperation over the last decade. And I see this as like 2-3 things. With barely 7 years left to achieve the SDGs, making use of common harmonized data is absolutely essential to accelerate this progress at this point. And we are hearing more and more that, that we're not really going to hit the mark with the SDGs 2030, but then we have other goals. Where do I see GIZ and more specifically data for policy in this landscape? I think the three-way approach that I mentioned that keeps governments and policymakers right at the center, while also being really cognizant of the fact that the private sector and its potential in future policy making is increasing. It provides that's why I believe that this three-way approach provides a good foundation for just strengthening the collaboration in this field, be avoiding unnecessary duplication of efforts because we have a lot out there, and C, making sure we can address these gaps in a targeted way. So this is in the backdrop that focusing on improving processes, mechanisms, and technical capacities is important. We can address a lot of foundational gaps if we focus on the processes and the mechanisms in our data ecosystems. There is, of course, no one size fits all when it comes to solutions, but approaches and frameworks are often of the design that can be tailored to specific contexts and can be adapted to certain contexts very often. And this is exactly what the data for policy approach offers. And with the Agenda 2063 specifically charting out really clear aspirations, I think to realize those, it requires that we look at quality, timely, and disaggregated data that guides targeted investments now. And this is really what looking at mechanisms, technical capacities, processes together as a community is something that we can do differently at this stage.
Great, thanks so much, Geeti. And I think your presentation and introduction to GIZ's data for policy approach, as well as the data for policy playbook that's being developed, is a really nice segue to our next speaker, Guyan Paris. So I'm just going to introduce him briefly before I hand it over to him. So Guyan is the head of technology and data for UNDP's Chief Digital Office. He leads the implementation of the data strategy for UNDP, which includes driving the transformation of UNDP into a data-driven organization and advising member states on their data, digital, and cloud strategies. Guyan is an expert in bringing people's voices into policymaking, and he has experience in digital campaigning and led data collection and analysis efforts of several global initiatives, including UN 75 and My World, which has brought in over 10 million voices worldwide through both public and private sector partnerships. Really excited to hear from you, Guyan. Over to you.
Thank you, Alison, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I see people from all over the world, which is great on a Saturday, including someone from where I live as well in New Jersey. So hi, hi there. Let me talk a bit about I don't have a nice presentation like Geeti had, but I'm going to talk a bit about about one of the things that Geeti touched on, which is the data for policy playbook that we are developing. And this has been a partnership with the GIZ and the other partners that you saw on that slide. We've been working very closely for almost a year on developing this playbook for policymakers on using data to inform their decision making. Now, there are a lot of playbooks out there on different things, and this touches upon the existing literature as well. But at the same time, this takes a totally different angle because most of the existing playbooks focuses on the data capacity, the data scientist, and the national statistical officers, how you can improve them. While all of them are important, this playbook touches the problem from the other side, which is from the data consumer side, like who wants to build more inclusive and effective policies using data, but unsure where to start. So this this playbook is going to provide that starting point for data consumers. Now, the early edition of this playbook will be launched at the World Data Forum in China on the 25th of April. When I say early edition, this is going to be what we call the MVP, the most minimum viable product. And the official launch will be in the summer of this year. So now, to ensure the playbook is user-centric and it's not a bunch of experts getting together and putting a playbook together, we took an approach where we actually take a very user-driven approach, meaning some of the things that we are saying in the playbook are actually implemented in countries. And along with GIZ, we've been working with 19 different policymakers on the ground in 13 countries to understand some of the needs on the ground, because you can develop a playbook, you can develop things, but this is where the rubber hits the road. So we want to understand some of the nuances involved at country level and bring that into the playbook as well. And this will be complemented by a global panel of experts sharing knowledge on how to tackle some of these problems. And also, it takes a very sector agnostic or region agnostic or even country agnostic approach, but it provides a structured way of approaching the problem in integrating data into policymaking. It's structured, but yet flexible, allowing policymakers not only to use data, defining the problem, but to really monitor the policies that they implement and how to evaluate them as well. Now, policymakers, as you know, have different varying levels of data expertise. And also what we are trying to do through this policy playbook is to make sure that depending on your level of understanding of data, there are different entry points to this playbook as well. And we take a 4-step approach or 4 dimensions, as we would like to call it. The first is actually defining the problem and understanding the data. And this doesn't need that level of data expertise. It is basically as identifying the problem as is, and also creating what we call data ecosystem mapping of where data exists and where data does not exist as well. And the next problem is accessing the data. Now, this requires a little bit of data expertise, data proficiency, and it is about supporting the policymaker, answering the questions like where to look for the data, and building these partnerships to get the data that is needed for this as well. And the third dimension, or the third process, is analyzing the data. And this requires a certain level of proficiency as well. And it'll not just include typical data analysis, but include like instructions providing on how to understand the data and what data products are possible using the data that you have in order to make these policies as well. And the final one is actually, I said, not just designing the policy, evaluating the impact of the policy as well. In my introduction, Alison, you mentioned I did brought people's voices into policymaking as well. Sometimes when you implement a policy, education policy, for example, the hard data will take 5 years to come or 10 years to come. But people's perception on how things are changing in their community, changing in their township is something that you can measure immediately as well, and go to people over time to see how people's perception have changed because of the policy that has been implemented as well. And with modern new data sources like social media, IoT, AI, you can bring in these to evaluate the policies that you have implemented as well. So this is the fourth dimension of the playbook. So without going further into the playbook itself, because I don't have a presentation, I would like to close with saying you can have the top of the line analysis, the best analysis possible, and provide the best data infrastructure. But yet, if you don't have the political will to change things, if you don't have the policymakers thinking that way to use data to change policy, nothing will go through. So this requires an organizational data culture change as well. So what we are trying to influence here is a culture change and a place to start for policymakers. So I'll stop there with the description of the playbook.
Thanks so much, Guyan. That was fantastic. And I really, it's great to hear kind of that user-centric approach that you're taking. And I think, you kind of touched on some of the particular kind of challenges with sort of integrating data into the mainstream policymaking process, like, having the right sort of political will and to be able to effectively have it be mainstreamed is really critical. I just have a couple follow-up questions for you that I'm wondering you could touch upon, particularly kind of related to the data for policy playbook that's being developed. So I'm wondering, I mean, I know it's still in development, but I'm wondering if there's a specific case or method that you know will be featured in the playbook that you think really exemplifies how data can be mainstreamed into the policymaking process.
So one of the that's a really interesting question, as and one I mentioned the culture change in my my previous so one of the things is actually demystifying data. And most of the time when we go to policymakers, what is, oh, data. Oh, that's a technical thing. Go and talk to the IT department about data. And that demystifying that is one of the big changes that we are looking for in the playbook as well. One of the tactical changes that we are looking for in the playbook, and also that culture shift. And I've been in front of policymakers who say, okay, we've used national statistics for the past 20 years, and that's how it's going to be done in the future as well. But changing that culture of making them comfortable in using non-traditional data. And there are innovators in national governments, self-starters who want to use these non-traditional data to do innovative things and win the hearts of leaders to change things. And this playbook provides that starting point for those who want to innovate as well. So, and once again, it requires time and investment to make this culture change happen. And this is where development agencies like UNDP, GIZ will come in and provide that capacity building, provide that those entry points for policymakers to go in and do that.
Great. Thanks so much, Guy. And I do see we have a couple attendees that have raised their hand. We'd encourage you, if you could actually, any questions you might have, if you could put it in the Q&A box, and we're going to have an audience Q&A session afterwards. So we'll hopefully be able to get to as many questions as possible. And Guy, and I just had one more follow-up question for you. I mean, and you sort of touched upon it, so you don't have to go into full depth on it, but I'm wondering sort of, you know, how this data for policy playbook fits into the overall strategy and sort of overarching objective of UNDP.
So at UNDP, from our vantage point, Alison, we've seen, especially during the times of COVID, people like government, especially sort of jumping into solutions because of the need. For example, implementing policies on like implementing digital systems on education, implementing systems on health, without thinking through how actually some of the data privacy issues. For example, I've actually seen in certain cases implementing online education systems without like asking kids to join things without even getting parents' consents. UNDP is involved in building what we call the digital public infrastructure, and that is creating these data exchanges, creating these digital ID systems, creating the policy layers and the regulation layers that is required for that as well. So what this playbook provides is a very structured approach to that problem, basically. People who want to start at different levels, and also structured approach to building that foundational layer. At the same time, like I said, where the rubber hits the road are the use cases. So we already have a couple of use cases. Geeti mentioned some of those in Kenya. We also have a use case in India where it uses geospatial data to detect farmland as well. So we use this because UNDP is present on the ground. We are using these use cases to take that, to understand the nuances in a country and take that experience into the playbook. And what we also have is South-South learning, as we call it. So we connect these countries to learn from each other as well in UNDP and implement the solutions in the country, understanding some of the nuances involved at the country level as well. So that's one way to bring the playbook to life, I would call it. And this is not going to be a static playbook that will remain there forever. This will continuously get updated from the learnings on the ground as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Guyan. Really informative. And I think that actually really leads us nicely to our next presenter, who'll be able to kind of really delve into specific country use cases. So our next presenter is Sarah Weller. the Senior Outreach Manager at the International Coastal Cleanup, who will speak about her country experiences with catalyzing citizen-generated data to help countries monitor marine litter and plastics. I saw in the chat, there was definitely some enthusiasm about citizen science, so really excited to have Sarah present on that. Sarah, as I mentioned, works at the International Coastal Cleanup, the ICC, which is an initiative of the Ocean Conservancy's Trash-Free Seas program. She enjoys working with a phenomenal network of coastal and waterway cleanup organizers worldwide, along with passionate educators and individuals who take action on the issue of plastic pollution in their own communities. In addition, she manages the creation and distribution of education and outreach materials for science-based solutions and maintains the Ocean Conservancy's data collection tools. I'm going to ask my colleague Steph to put up Sarah's slides, and Sarah, over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you all of the organizers of this wonderful side session for giving me a portion of your time today, and all of the attendees listening from all over the world. It's wonderful to see where everyone's from and all different types of stakeholders as well. So my name is Sarah. Like Allison said, I am part of the Trash-Free Seas program at Ocean Conservancy. We are a nonprofit, non-governmental organization. We're based in the United States, and as it says in our name, we sort of work on all of the major threats facing our ocean today. And while our work is a bit domestic in focus, it is one global ocean after all, and so much of what we do extends to partnerships worldwide, especially what I'm going to be talking about today, some of these on-the-ground use case scenarios. When Allison and team invited me to speak about data-driven partnerships, I was very excited because that is what I do in a nutshell, and I help manage a lot of the data collection tools that we have at Ocean Conservancy for our annual International Coastal Cleanup. So next slide, please. Just wanted to give a little bit of kind of the mission of our work. We really do value science-driven solutions for our ocean, for a cleaner and healthier ocean and waterways for all, for the communities that depend on them, for the wildlife that we love, and all the ways that we rely on our ocean. And so plastic pollution in particular is one that's, as you can see here in the image, very tangible, very visible. And luckily, it is one that citizen scientists can really play a key role in helping drive solutions and just helping inform an understanding of this problem. Plastics it's a relatively new science, if you will, the issue of plastic pollution. And so and I can't take credit for this since the cleanup that I'm about to discuss has been going on for many years. But the founders of that really had the foresight to understand how important collecting data, even simple data, would be to better our understanding and to help drive us towards solutions to preventing this issue that you kind of see here reflected in the image. Next slide, please. And I'm going to gloss really quickly over just the initiative that I work on, the ICC, I'll call it, but this does kind of lay the framework for then one of the use cases or the projects that I want to pivot towards that we worked really closely with a partner in Ghana on in the last 6 months or so. So I promise this is just some context building to help kind of inform what I'll talk about in a minute. But the ICC, it is the largest volunteer effort for our world's oceans. It usually takes place on or around the third Saturday in September. Maybe you have taken part in a cleanup during this season of September, October. Really depends on our partners that we have around the world. We have country level, municipality level, in the US state partners who then have their own network of leaders who kind of disseminate information and get communities organized and make these cleanups happen, whether they're on a coastline, a beach, or inland waterways as well. And so I just wanted to put here a couple of the high-level stats of just the cumulative impact that this effort has had over the years. And we know these data because volunteers for the last 37 years have done a fantastic job of collecting that information. And we've finessed, it's definitely evolved, but we've finessed a structure that works pretty well in getting those resources out to people, getting those data collection methodologies out, and then having those data come back to Ocean Conservancy. And my team and I pride ourselves on taking the storage and organization of those collected data very seriously, because volunteers do take that extra effort while they're out trying to beautify their communities and making a difference. They take that extra effort in tabulating those data. So they're very important to us. And I'll talk about how they drive policy change and other solutions as well. Next slide, please. So I kind of already touched on this, but we do have a data collection methodology, good old-fashioned paper data card. It's evolved over the years. We've also moved into a digital form. We have an app that volunteers can use. And I will say that, you know, we run this annual event, but these are data tools that can be utilized by groups anywhere. They can request these materials free of charge from Ocean Conservancy. We ship out the paper data cards. The app is obviously a bit more efficient in that it's just free to download, and you know, many people are able to kind of have that smart device with them, or cleanup organizers are able to have a smart device or a smartphone with them to get that data collection tool and the instructions right in the palm of your hand. Next slide, please. The data feed into an online open access database that I could speak to at length, and I'm happy to share kind of the link to that in the chat there. But that was a very key and intentional goal that we had, and that we wanted those data to be accessible. And I know we're talking a lot about having access to data, translating those data for policymakers. Ocean Conservancy does a lot of that, where we'll put together reports and we'll pulse data from specific regions of the world, comparing different geographies, looking at the data over time, kind of doing that back-end analysis to then make it very easy when we do go speak to policymakers and we work with other kind of change makers in the space. Maybe it's industry innovators looking to redesign a packaging item that is problematic for the environment. The data are used. So we always make sure that we tell our volunteers that. And here are just a couple of resources that we've developed over the years. And the image on the far right is the front side of the data card that we have. Citizen science data card. It's printed in about 20 different languages. You'll see there's just very simple how it works, 4-step process, so that if anyone were to just kind of obtain this methodology in their hand and the paper data card, they could read it and for the most part figure out how to do a cleanup and how to collect those data. So definitely making it as simple as possible and straightforward has helped us accumulate as much data as possible over the years. And then we've also ventured into working with other data scientists, citizen scientists that are a bit more into the hard science and wanting to dive a bit more into data collection. So the screenshot you see in the middle, that's a brand data card where not only are the volunteers collecting item by item data, but also tracking different types of brands too. So we try to tailor it to whoever we might be working with on a cleanup project. Next slide. And I talked about our app a bit, but I'll skim over this. It's called CleanSwell, and I really would just want to focus here on the right side of the screen where there are some icons showing the types of data that I'm talking about that volunteers are collecting. So it's the simple, what types of trash are you finding on the beach? What types of plastic pollution are you finding in your waterway? And it's a simple, like graphic heavy collection screen so that even my 4-year-old niece could have this up on a phone and be able to tap those icons and collect data as a citizen scientist. Next slide, please. So we publish these data. This is just a snapshot of an annual report that we have. We look at global trends, like here you'll see the top 10 items found. But of course, like I said, in the database, you can zone in on a specific geography. I know a lot of our partners in Africa track their specific data through our database over the years, looking at it temporally, pulling out reports when they go speak to policymakers and whatnot, and acknowledging their volunteers that are doing a lot of that collection year round as well. Next slide. And then finally, here's just a couple examples of the ways that ICC data that we know of have driven policy. And I will say the beauty, but also kind of the downside of having open access database is that we have it there for all. So researchers, scientists, anyone can go in and pull those data. So we don't always have our finger on the pulse of how many different use cases exist out there for this beach cleanup and this plastic pollution data, but just some of the ones here from international treaty level to plastic bag ban in Kenya that our partners helped drive down to local municipality laws. Next slide. So I just have 2 more slides, and this is just really what I wanted to pivot towards today, which is an effort that we did with our partner in Ghana in the last 6 months. That's our partner there in the photo. His name is Tyler, and he leads a nonprofit organization in the Accra area. And he's been doing beach cleanups for a long time. He's been a partner of the International Coastal Cleanup. But we recently had been hearing from, more and more partners are inclined to work towards these sustainable development goals that I actually think someone mentioned in the chat. So SDG 14 is one that Ocean Conservancy is particularly focused on. And I apologize, my text is kind of overlapping there, but SDG 14.1 is the one that we started to look at with some colleagues at IIASA, reached out to us, as well as UN Environment Program. And we thought we'd work together and try to figure out, all right, well, there is a lot of cleanup action already happening, and we have a pretty good methodology, but looking at the specific metrics and goals of this SDG, and specifically this 14.1.1b that looks at plastic pieces per square kilometer, we thought, okay, how can we tailor the great data that we're already getting and the instructions that we have and have it apply for this SDG and to be able to better track this goal, and so that our partners could share their data with reporting entities in their nation and help guide and track this goal across the next decade. So we thought, okay, plastic pieces, that's something that ICC volunteers are already tracking, but area, square kilometers, was something that we weren't really tracking very well. We were doing linear distance well, but not area. So we worked, UNEP and NS kind of put our heads together and figured out taking kind of a methodology that they have that's a bit more rigorous, that would require a little bit more scientific training involving transects of a beach or a coastline. And then we took our ICC data, which is a bit more opportunistic in that volunteers, they hit a beach and then they spread out everywhere, and there isn't much of a regimented process. And we tried to combine the two, and we basically came up with a draft of some guidelines. And then we reached out to partners like Tyler in Ghana and a couple other partners around the world to help us pilot and ground truth this new methodology that we're working towards, so that we can get to that key metric that we needed for 14.1, which was the plastic density, basically, or pieces per square kilometer. Next slide, please. So we got that methodology to Tyler and his team. You'll see there, he worked on the more rigorous side. He tried doing the transects and to figure out area and to use basically the ICC methodology in that way. And they also just did a typical beach cleanup as well. And we had kind of devised a simpler way to estimate area covered as well, so that even if a cleanup leader is out on the beach, they don't need to have technical equipment to get it done. All they just need to do is kind of collect the raw data that they were already collecting with like one more measurement involved. So we wanted to make it low tech, again, easy as possible, get volunteers of all ages and backgrounds and knowledge levels involved, and then kind of do the waste characterization that we're known to do and that our partners know well. So you can see here on the screen, they're sorting the different trash items and logging that item data. And finally, those data came back to us. We got phenomenal feedback from our partners like Tyler, kind of, like I said, ground truthing. Is this methodology going to work? Do you think this would be applicable to a cleanup leader in a different area if you weren't there with your background and your knowledge? And do you think that a citizen science cleanup around the world could apply these guidelines that we've developed? Took all that feedback, kind of finessed it, and we're very soon going to be publishing this. It's a mouthful, but it's the Global Community Science Beach Cleanup Guidelines. So we're very happy to share that very soon. Get those steps out there. It walks through that app that I talked about. It walks through the data card, but then it also will help, connect leaders to these SDG entities, these entities in their nations that are actually doing the statistics and logging that information to track those SDGs. So that is probably our next step, is kind of figuring out, because it's different everywhere. And we're learning that, okay, what's the next step to do with all this raw data to make sure that it gets to the statistical groups and those reporting entities to make sure that the data are amplified and used to track this SDG. Next slide. I think that's it. I have my contact information. I know I whizzed through a lot, so please feel free to email me if you have any questions. And again, just wanted to show an image of, we love this project because volunteers, young and old, can take part. Maybe they don't even know what an SDG is yet, but they will know that they've contributed to it and that they're doing great work for the environment immediately, but then those data are used in the background and working hard long-term as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That was fantastic. And I know there was a bunch of comments in the chat that I know hopefully we'll be able to get to them a little bit later, and Sarah might be able to address them via the chat. I also think I saw a message sort of before your presentation in terms of how do you engage the public, within these particular use cases. And I think this is what you discussed is really excellent example of that. So thank you for sharing. I do have one additional sort of follow-up question for you that I'm hoping you can touch on. If you could share maybe one or two key lessons from your respective projects that you think are applicable to the rest of the Africa region, particularly in terms of scaling citizen science approaches into evidence-based decision-making. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Couple of lessons that immediately come to mind. I think I might have touched on it, but just to reiterate too, having options for volunteers, sort of kind of meeting groups and meeting folks that reach out to us where they are has helped really drive the project forward. So like I said, we've got different types of data cards, right? We've got easier ones for youth audiences. We've got more technical ones if you've got maybe university students that have a bit more of that knowledge base and aren't as intimidated by that data collection process. So having all that sort of information, but then making sure that those data sets in turn will still read with one another in the back end. It's both a challenge, but it's a great one to have. We always talk about any data is wonderful for us, and we do a lot of work in the background and kind of making the data read. So it's time consuming. I will say that that's one challenge in that Ocean Conservancy, we do dedicate a lot of time to kind of massaging those data and making them more unified so that we can compare over time. But our partners do a great job of just utilizing the methodology that works best for them. So basically keeping it the simpler, the better in that regard. And then to this SDG project specifically, at first in our guidelines, we were looking at, all right, maybe we'll have the partner help us calculate that specific metric. And then we realized, well, they might not have this specific tool. They might be measuring something this way or that way. So it started to get more complicated. And we thought, you know what, let's just have our partners, trust our partners to collect as much raw data as possible, not get bogged down in the calculations when we knew that we could work on those, or reporting entities said that they would like to work on those and they wanted to see the raw data anyway. So we thought, let's skip as many steps that don't need to bog down our partners and allow them and their volunteers to feel like they're still creating as big of an impact as possible. Because we do hear that at beach cleanups, people are like, I just want to get as much trash as possible. I don't want to spend the time with the data. So it's this constant balance of making it efficient on both sides.
That's great. Thanks so much, Sarah. I love the idea. I mean, I think we're coming to a theme is keep it simple and keep it tailored to the local context, which I think actually really also leads us nicely to our next speaker, Angelique Kabeza, who's the Executive Secretary of the Rwanda Civil Society Platform. And she's going to discuss her experiences in Rwanda working with partners to make data more localized and tailored to communities' needs. As I mentioned, Angelique works at the Rwanda Civil Society Platform, an umbrella organization representing over 40 civil society organizations within Rwanda. She is responsible for facilitating and empowering the work of these civil society organizations in support of sustainable development across the country. So over to Angelique, and Steph, if you could pull up Angelique's slide. Thanks, Angelique. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Alison. As Alison has just said, I am Angelique Kabeza. I am the Executive Secretary of Rwanda Civil Society Platform. Rwanda Civil Society Platform is an apex organization for all local civil society organizations in Rwanda. To correct Alison, it's not only 40. It's we have 12 umbrellas that all of them together has 1,500 civil society organizations that work in different areas of intervention. The platform brings them together for advocacy purposes, policy influencing, and using the data effectively. Excuse me. Next slide, please. In last December 2022, we have done 2 workshops in partnership with CSDN Trends. We did 2 workshops in 2 districts, one district in the urban area and the rural area. where we wanted to see how the communities perceive data and its use, either in the urban and in the rural area. We brought together communities from the district level, even at the government, the high level of the government. We brought together the Ministry of Local Government and the second level at the district, where we invited the planning, the directors of planning, and at the local level, we invited the executive secretaries of sectors and also at the cell level to bring them together and talk how we use data, if we use it effectively, or anything to improve. We also, this was the objective of these two workshops was to foster and also have an understanding of local districts' data need for planning, decision making, and advocacy. Also to cultivate greater understanding and awareness of census data. We did the census data as a country last year, December, but the results are not yet out. It was the data that we have is from 2012. So the one we did last year was 10 years. We are still waiting for the results yet. We worked with the National Institute of Statistics, where we were together in those all workshops, and also taught us how they do surveys and how the data they have, how they share with the public. We also we worked with NISR, the Institute of Statistics, with the community leaders and also civil society networks that we work together, and also those that work in those districts at the community level to enhance their user engagement and data dissemination efforts of census data. The next, please, Steph. Oh, those are the pictures of those two workshops. We had the leader of the Rwanda Civil Society Platform and the leader of the director of the department in NISR, the Statistics Institute, and ONS UK, and an invitee from UNICEF. They opened the workshops. And Alison from Trends, we had all of these participants from NISR, from the local government, district and sales officials. At each session, we had focus group discussions where we discussed about on our daily work, what we do, how we use the data we have, and what are the challenges we face on our everyday work. Next, please. In those two workshops, we identified some successes. We also successes, yes, but we also encountered some challenges. But let's start with the successes that we found. Mostly our successes, it's because we work together, we do partnerships with government institutions, private partners, development partners, private sector, and also the civil society at large. That is the first successes that make us efficiently or overcome the challenges, some of the challenges that we face. And each institution in this, the government institution, the private sector, we forge pathways for accelerating data-driven decision-making in Africa, in Rwanda in particular. In these two workshops, participants were actively engaged and provided candid feedback on their districts and organizations' data needs. The participants really gave us the overview of how they use data on their daily basis, and also the staff from the statistics institution, they gave us data dissemination department. Also, they also presented the local data offerings and preliminary dissemination plans for the census. Next. Yes, the challenges that we face for today, the local leaders that we were together, they encountered some challenges, like for example, from migration, from urban to rural, from rural to urban. Most of the young people, they migrate every now and then because they come to look for jobs in the capital city. So their data always changes because some people comes from the rural to Kigali. They don't know that they still have the same number. The next month, they don't know if they still have the same number of their population in one cell. So that was an issue because they don't know how to keep count and how to know this has left. They have gone to which other cell. And also for the birth registration and death registration. For the birth, nowadays, because of giving birth at the hospitals, now the data are recorded, we know, but there are some births that are still happening in the communities that are not registered right away after the birth, the same as death registration. And also for the community-based health insurances, we have the schemes depending on the category you are in. You have to register in your community-based health insurance, but when you move, it's the same as the migration issue. When you move to that cell, going to another one, you have to come back to use the services at the health post where you first did your community health insurance. And those data are not recorded. It's written in the books at the health post, but it's not, you cannot, if you move, you have to register somewhere else, and then it will be duplication of data. Also, there is accessibility challenges. The data that we have, it's all in English, and there is a language barrier, digital accessibility challenges among women, older, and also people with disability, and rural-based population. Statistical literacy, lack of ICT skills and upskilling women. How the data is portrayed, some population, some Rwandans cannot read, cannot see, and get the information. And also there's a communication gap, strengthen communication between CSOs, district and local leaders, and NISR is needed because you can find the data on the website of the institution, but not everyone can access the website. And also, you will excuse me, my son is coming in my office, that's why challenge of dissemination and data availability. It's only available at the district level, and it needs to be disseminated at the cell and sector level. Efforts should also be made to communicate data to the whole household, because the data stays at, it always stays at the national level. That's what I can say, at the district level, but not everyone at the local level knows what is happening, and if there's an information of what's happening in the agricultural seasons or the weather, not everyone will know, except maybe on the radios. But also the researchers found out that not everyone is on the radio all the time from morning to evening, because that's when they give the communiques. Yeah. We also gave some recommendations to the government and the local officials that we were together, that we need improved communications, also user engagement and dissemination efforts to meet community and CSOs needs. As I was saying, the community, most of them, they are not aware of the data that we have, and the statistical institutions, they have a lot of data, they do a lot of surveys, but it's not disseminated up to the local level, to the grassroots level. Also, we recommended to have to increase community outreach programs to make sure that there is local meetings, there is radio campaigns, and in schools to address also accessibility challenges, and also to make sure that it's written in Kinyarwanda, our mother tongue. And for people with disabilities to be able to have that information, if it's blind people, if it's deaf people, so that everyone can get information by being inclusive. Also to have products in Kinyarwanda to local districts for them to be able to explain to the households. Also to improve website accessibility for us CSOs, and also to dedicate a focal point. This was also a challenge that we have at the National Institute of Statistics in Rwanda. We didn't have relations that helped us work together for access to data as CSOs. And CSOs, we use a lot of data for evidence-based advocacy, for policy influencing, but there was no connection between us as civil society and the Institute. We recommended that we should have a focal point from our side and their side to be able to work together for this coming dissemination of the census data, and also to increase efforts at the cell and sector level. I said that in the previous one, but this was a very big challenge because at the community level, they are not aware of the data that we have and how to be used. And also to capacitate the officials, local and also civil society organizations, so that they know the data that is available and how to use it and how to read, how to interpret the data that is available. Yeah, thank you. I think that was my last slide.
Thanks so much, Angelique. And I just also wanted to reiterate that was, and I'm not sure if it was mentioned, but this was actually the pilot workshop approach. So this was the first time that, we had sort of developed a multi-stakeholder partnership in conjunction with the National Statistics Office and civil society organizations to really go into the local communities and sort of, understand their needs and figure out kind of best how we might tailor census results and census dissemination reports sort of moving forward. We are running a little bit short on time, so I think I am going to pass it to our next speaker because I really want to make sure we at least have some time for a lightning round. So thank you so much, Angelique. Next, certainly not last, but certainly not least, I'm going to turn it over to our final speaker, Charles Ogola, who's a statistician at the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, which is IGAD. The IGAD, as mentioned, he works as a statistician at the IGAD Secretariat, one of the 8 regional economic communities in Africa. In his role, he coordinates and provides leadership in health and social statistics statistics, including migration and displacement statistics activities within the IGAD region. His main responsibilities include contributing to the formulation and implementation of the statistics program on migration and displacement, including improving the coverage, quality, and harmonization of migration statistics within the IGAD region. Mr. Ogola also leads the IGAD Regional Migration Data Technical Working Group, that's a mouthful, which aims to improve the availability and quality of migration and displacement statistics as a basis for evidence-based policymaking across the IGAD region. Charles, I'm going to turn it over to you, and if my colleague Steph could pull up his slides. Thanks so much. Over to you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Alison, and a very wonderful introduction, such that I don't need to now again introduce myself. And actually, it's a pleasure to be here and also just to speak on this topic on issues of mobilizing data-driven partnership and also looking into the evidence-informed policy making across Africa. As you have mentioned, IGAD is one of the regional economic bloc, or 8 out of the ones that build the building blocks of Africa Union, and therefore the mission majorly is in terms of promoting the regional cooperation and integration to add value to the member state effort in achieving peace, security, sustainable development, and also improving the quality of life in the region. Next slide. IGAD as a regional economic bloc is composed of 8 member states in the Eastern Horn of Africa, which I have highlighted there in terms of Sudan, Eritrea, Kenya, Uganda, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti, and with a square kilometer of 5.2 million kilometers square, and also a coastline of 6,960 kilometers, and the population is predominantly youthful, with 70% of the climatic features being arid and semi-arid lands. So that's just a nutshell in terms of what the IGAD region covers. Next. And when we look at this, IGAD is also one of the goals that we look at, whereby we have the IGAD regional strategy that guides the priorities of IGAD, and its ultimate goal is in terms of transforming transformation towards sustainable development and resilience and also stability in the IGAD region, and the different pillars, including agriculture and national resource management, environment, and also issues of regional economic cooperation and integration, also the issues of peace and security, and also another pillar dealing with the social development. And lastly, also in terms of a pillar, there's also the corporate development that just deals with the institutional capacity building. The first 4 pillars majorly look into how can we be able to build the capacity of the IGAD member states so that we can be able to really achieve the goal of sustainable development. And with this topic that we are talking today, it's very important that we look into the issues of how does this data really drive in terms of the policy making, and therefore I will be talking about some of the efforts that we have been really done in terms of ensuring that we have a quality statistics within the region, which can also help in terms of evidence-based decision making. Next. So when we talk about this, there's some critical policies, protocols, and also frameworks that really governs the issues of data and statistics, not only at the regional level, but also at the national level, and also the continental level, and also at the global level. As we look at this, it's very important to look into a scenario whereby there is an alignment to the different frameworks, so that there is also the issues of how can we be able even to compare these statistics and also to influence in terms of the policy making. In terms of some of the strategic documents that also we infer, one of them already mentioned by Alison as she started the introductions of the session is about the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and also the Sustainable Development Goal of 2030, which also as a regional economic bloc, also we are mandated to also report on some of the critical achievements towards those global strategies. Also, we have the IGAD regional strategy, whereby data and statistics is very important in terms of informed policy making, and the national development agendas of the IGAD member states, which also governs their need for different data and statistics that will be utilized in terms of making some of the decision. In terms of the policy frameworks, we have many policy frameworks depending on the sectors. And in terms of migration, for example, we have the Africa Union Migration Policy Framework, and also we have the Regional Migration Policy for IGAD. And these all are also aligned to the national and also the continental level. Some of the guiding principles or some of the key statistics data that also, some of the strategies that also help us go back in terms of statistics is the international recommendations and standards, which also help us in terms of aligning and also issues of the comparability of data. Then we also have the SASHA 2, that is the strategy for harmonization of statistics, which really governs the issues of the harmonization and also the comparability at the African continental level, but also as a regional level, we have the IGAD regional strategy for development of statistics, which governs all the issues about the data and statistics at IGAD, but also aligned to the national strategies and development of statistics at the national levels, but also with SASHA 2 at the regional, at the continental level, and also looking into some of the principles that are articulated at African Charter of Statistics. Having said that, the IGAD regional strategy for development of statistics is very important because one of the areas that it looks at is how does it guide us in terms of the provision of data for African regional integration agenda, also looking into the supply of data for development of IGAD region, and also trying to articulate the role of the regional strategy for development of statistics in the African statistical system, which really look into the issues of the coordination at all the value chain and also all the levels. With 5 strategic goals, one of them is about availability of data, the other one is the comparability and the quality, the other one is also the issue of the coordination of the regional statistical system, also talking about how do we profile statistics so that they can be utilized in terms of decision making, and the last goal majorly looking into the statistical capacity development at the regional level and including all the member states. Next. Yeah, so some of the areas that I just need to talk about in terms of statistics or some of the efforts that IGAD has made in order to really improve in terms of the decision making. Number one is the establishment of the regional technical working groups on statistics at the regional level. And this is very important because you will note that different stakeholders play different roles in terms of the whole value chain of statistics. And therefore, it is very important to have the whole of government and all of society approach whereby we bring all the member states and all the practitioners into one forum or platform within the existing governance structure of IGAD, so that they can also be able to articulate and talk about the different issues arising in terms of the quality improvement of the quality of statistics. And one of the technical working group being the Migration Data Technical Working Group. We also have others which are on other sectors like the national account. But the essence here is to bring all and to really enhance the issue of the coordination amongst all the stakeholders, and also bringing the different technical partners who are also key, so that we are also able to leverage on each other's effort, but also pulling resources together. In these technical partners, we have been working closely with GIZ, SIMPI, ILO, Statistics Sweden, Africa Union, in terms of just consulting and looking at how can we be able to all together work in terms of just promoting this agenda forward. And then also we have regional workshops that we have been conducting in terms of statistics. And this one is whereby also provides a platform for the various member states to exchange the different learning exchanges, and also talk about the different efforts that they have been able to do, and also share some of the best practices, and therefore really help in terms of improving statistics. We also work together with the continental level with Africa Union and also the member states in generating the first IGAD statistics report, whereby the data collection took place, whereby the member states focal points were able to collect the data. And then at that particular point, they were also able to, we provided a platform whereby there was the validation, and then also came up the report. And this report has been very important because it has also been used in terms of looking into how can it also advise in terms of the some of the policies, for example, the IGAD regional migration policy framework, and also the issues of the pre-movement protocols. That is one of the core areas of IGAD. Then learning exchange between the member states so that they can also be able to learn from each other. We have been able to facilitate. I cannot forget to mention that supporting the member states at their national level, it's very important because most of the data are not only at the national statistical offices, but we also have other different players who are also looking into these statistics. Therefore, establishing the technical working group within the existing structures has been one of the most important things that has really helped in terms of, even for them, in terms of now starting to share data, in terms of also starting to also look at how they be able to harmonize the concept definitions and methodologies, and also in terms of ensuring that they are also able to look at the articulation of the different issues. And this technical working group are being led by the national statistical offices, who are the national statistical coordinators. Next slide, please. Having said that, some of the areas that I just wanted to mention, because of when we talk about the data for decision making, is that the data collection, validation, and analysis, we have been able to work and jointly together at the continental, regional, and national collaboration and cooperation, whereby at the national level, in terms of the data collection, we have the statistical focal points who are being able to really coordinate the issue of collection of the data. And then at the regional level, we provide even a platform whereby they come together in terms of ensuring that this data is also looked at in terms of the harmonized disease methods and also the issues of the validation. And then working closely with our mother organization, that is Africa Union, and other technical partners like ILO and the rest, depending on the sector statistics that we are talking about. And with this, the validation and working together with all of them is also able to help us in terms of the ownership. And as a result, there has been a production of different reports. And one of them, for example, the migration statistics report, which really also fits into addressing some of the issues of the IGAD regional strategy, IGAD migration policy framework, the global compact of migration, the global compact of refugee, and also the free movement protocol on and transhumans. And all this is really important because now we are talking about how are we able also to make the decisions. Then also talking about the data capacity assessment was very important because at that particular point, you look at all the value chains in terms of from data collection up to the dissemination. You look at those capacity assessment at the regional level and also at the national level. And this has really helped us in terms of even addressing the issues of the governance structure. For example, the establishment of the technical working group, and also trying to really help the member states, and even at the regional level, how do we come with a mechanism for data sharing? Because this is also one of the challenges that really needs to be articulated so that at least we are able also to really have that area whereby data sharing is also enhanced. And also, IGAD worked very much also together with other partners in terms of now doing an assessment on the labor market information system at the regional level, with the aim of, first of all, the results are out. And now this will also help in terms of now coming up with a roadmap of establishment of a regional labor market information system, which will really address the issues of the demand and supply of labor at the regional level, but also taking into consideration that they have to be fed by the national labor market information system. And some of the areas that this labor market information system will really help is in terms of the actualization of the roadmap of the free movement protocol, which has already been adopted by most of the member states, and also the Africa Continental Free Trade also is very important when we talk about the regional integration. And lastly, we also have the climate prediction, whereby we have a center of excellence, which is the IGAD Climate Prediction Analytics Center, which provides very good climatic outlooks,
Charles,
which
I'm
really
sorry to
helps in
interrupt.
terms of
I might
bringing
just have
together
you
those information so
wrap
that
up
they can be
shortly.
utilized by the different stakeholders. And these are normally.
I apologize for interrupting. I was just hoping
Yeah,
you could
actually,
wrap
I
up
was
shortly.
in the last slide.
Okay, thank you.
But anyway,
I think Charles is frozen. Oh, he looks like he his connection came off. So we are running a little bit out of time, but I just oh, Charles, can you hear us?
can hear you. I was in the last slide, but anyway, it's okay. So
I apologize.
that is my presentation. Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I mean, thank you so much for a really rich presentation. And I wanted to make sure we had time to really get to everyone's discussion points and talking points. I also think it was really great to hear about your discussion, sort of how you've gone through and developed regional data working groups and the importance of whole of government approaches. Really, really fantastic. I think maybe instead of our lightning discussion, I just ask, before I turn it over to my colleague Gidi for some final wrap-up points, I'm wondering if perhaps we could turn it over to each panelist who can provide maybe a 30-second any reflection or any particular thing that you want attendees to come away from this in terms of how we can better mobilize multi-stakeholder partnerships, particularly in Africa. So maybe I'll start with Guyan first and then turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Alison. Very, very insightful discussion. I would like to close with saying partnerships are like the seeds that needs to be nurtured and that needs care and nutrition as well. And the use cases that you saw today are the only way to do that, like to build the partnership, understand each other's differences and move forward. So treat your partnerships like relationships.
Great. Sarah?
Well, I was just going to say the same thing, Guyan, so thank you for that. And I just want to thank the other panelists today. It was really interesting to see, you know, I'm kind of on the front end of that data collection process, and to hear more about like what happens after those data are collected and what some of the challenges are that you face when going to reporting agencies or policymakers. And it's got me thinking about what we can do to kind of better improve that and help kind of moderate that between what we see on the ground with our partners and be that communication or that connection to make those, you know, to make that data be as useful as possible. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great. Charles, perhaps maybe you could even touch on the cross sort of regional approach to this and why it's so important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much. And actually, in terms of this, I just want to say that majority of mobility takes place within the region. And in terms, and thus it's very important that it includes also the countries in the region, and therefore the bigger picture of mobility patterns also becomes very clear when we adopt a regional perspective. And this majorly to help in developing the evidence-based policies, and one looks beyond not only at the national data, as per the definition of international migration, it also takes place between the countries. Having said that, I think IGAD as a regional economic bloc, one of our real strengths is in terms of driving the agenda of harmonization, which is needed to really have an understanding beyond national system, and also providing the capacity building and making available data for the use in the national regional policies. And therefore, it's very important also to leverage on the existing structures and also the platform that have already been established. And lastly, talking about the partnership, it's very important also to include the technical partners apart from the member states only for evidence-based policy making. And therefore, you really need also to invest in data, more so in terms of pooling resources and also in terms of the expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Angelique? Not sure if we can hear her. Okay, maybe, sorry, Angelique, I think hopefully you'll be able to come back in. But if I know we're short on time, so I'm just going to turn it over to Geeti Patwal for some concluding remarks.
Yes, thank you. These were some really rich discussions today. And while the event has come to an end, our dialogue on catalyzing data-driven partnerships will certainly continue on an ongoing basis. I will attempt to summarize the path forward, but let me just start with first thanking all the panelists for being so open and sharing their insights today. From country-level initiatives in Ghana and Rwanda, it is more and more clear that building strong local partnerships leverages a network of expertise that is critical as policymakers sort of seek to respond to ongoing shocks, as well as the new and unprecedented risks that we are facing. Coming together of academia, grassroots level initiatives, nonprofits, private sector entities, and the governments is really at the core of this endeavor. And it is particularly encouraging for me that new approaches and data sources, such as the community science data, thanks Sarah for the term that I learned today, is being increasingly mainstreamed as a part of policymaking narrative and in the form of really impacting municipality laws in Ghana. Very impressive. It is also very promising for me to see us looking inwards and fostering greater understanding of local district needs, for example, in Rwanda. And it is reaffirming, I believe, for data for policy approach that civil society indeed is one of the biggest and most critical players in the data ecosystem, and we need to realize on its potential more and more. Insights shared from the work of IGAD and the approach of UNDP are both a solid reminder of the opportunities that are presented by cross-country learning and regional cooperation. I'm looking at the regional strategies of IGAD that are very effectively feeding back into national development agendas, and the standardized and harmonized statistics and the regional technical working groups that are at the center of guiding the successful implementation. I think other regions have a lot to learn from this already. Through the data for policy making playbook, we are talking some great entry points for capacity building of governments and of policymakers, which is indeed about building long-term capabilities to implement solutions in both an ad hoc, demand-driven way, but also in a more institutionalized way. And these approaches continue to push the envelope in developing robust, scalable data ecosystems that are backed by good governance. And continued support to these approaches is needed to accelerate the achievement of the Agendas 2030 and 2063. And lastly, reinforcing our existing partnerships, but also building new ones will be essential to achieving these goals while the African region strives to own its own development agenda. So thank you again from us, and thank you to all the panelists, all the participants for joining us today and being a part of this really important dialogue.
Thanks so much, Geeti, and thanks to everyone for joining. I'm dropping my email in there in case you'd like to reach out for any further questions directly. We'll be sharing the slides and recording with everyone who attended. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye, everyone.